topic given by Professor Menon is very interesting. Challenges in the development of Indian education since independence. So, and this is the 16th series of our webinar. We have started this webinar from 15th March, and we are aimed to reach to 75th webinar, and step by step we are climbing. So now I request Professor Pramod Kumar to conduct the program. Professor Pramod Kumar. Pramod, please unmute yourself, Pramod. You are muted.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for your leadership, support, guidance, and your direction that you are giving. And may I, on behalf of Indira Gandhi National Open University and the Center for Freedom Struggle and Diaspora Studies, welcome all of you. We are so very delighted to bring you another significant lecture program, this 16th series of the webinar on the topic of challenges in the development of Indian education since independence. This is very important, and our university has been kind of placing ourselves, kind of fulfilling its responsibility to initiate this discourse. And we welcome all the distinguished participants in today's program who have joined us from all parts of our country. And since this program is broadcasted through many diverse platforms such as Facebook and YouTube, it's a truly global event. Whatever our experts are going to say, our chairman of this lecture series, and then our president, Professor Sumitra Kukreti ji, who will be delivering presidential address, and then Professor Mohan B. Menon, Honorable Chairperson, Disha Global Trust, former Director and Chief, UNESCO Educational Program for Palestine, Refugees, Jordan, Deputy Vice Chancellor. His profile is very big. We'll request our Honorable Pro-Vice Chancellor Saab, Professor Satyakam, to introduce him briefly. But before that, I will request that as a part of our tradition, we'll initiate the proceedings of today with the Kulgeet of our university. I'll request our technical support, Sanjay ji, but please to play that so that we can formally begin with today's program. Our Kulgeet, IGNOU's Kulgeet, please. Thank you.
ये है जन जन का विश्वविद्यालय, ये है जन जन का विश्वविद्यालय, सरल सुगम शिक्षा का आलय। जन जन का विश्वविद्यालय, जन जन का विश्वविद्यालय, ज्योत जलाए ज्ञान की, स्वाध्याय की, अनुसंधान की राह दिखाए वंचितों को, शिक्षा के अधिकार की। ना उम्र का कोई बंधन, ना बंदिश परिधि की, घर घर है बना शिक्षा का देवालय। ये है जन जन का विश्वविद्यालय, जन जन का विश्वविद्यालय, जन जन का जन का मान सम्मान पहचान है। राष्ट्र का आह्वान है, वरदान है, अभिमान है। राष्ट्र का आह्वान, वरदान, अभिमान है। सर्व सुलभ सर्वोत्तम शिक्षा का है वाला, मुक्त और दूरस्थ शिक्षा का महालय। ये है जन जन का विश्वविद्यालय, जन जन का विश्वविद्यालय, देश विदेश पटल पर भूषित, नवाचार से सज्जित, गुणवत्ता से परिपूरित, ज्ञान वाणी ज्ञान दर्शन ज्ञान कोश कोश से संचित, ज्ञान कोश से संचित, सर्वगुण संपन्न, शिक्षा का हिमालय, शिक्षा का हिमालय, यह जन जन का विश्वविद्यालय, जन जन का विश्वविद्यालय।
Thank you very much. This song truly underlines the character, the vision, and mission of our university. So, with this, I think the tone has been set, and we will go ahead with this program. As we all understand that education is the strength of every country. The success of all nations is inevitably determined by their educational systems. And since independence, India has been progressively growing in the education field. There have been both enormous challenges and immense opportunities to overcome these challenges in order to make Indian higher education landscape much more comprehensive and inclusive. We have very eminent speaker for today, Professor Menon, and I was telling you that his profile is very big, and to kind of do justice and to kind of introduce him like in the way that it deserves, I would request our Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor Saab, Professor Satyakamji, to do this job for us, to do this honor for us. He is the director of the Center for Freedom Struggle. Center for Freedom Struggle, and which is very central to this organization of this lecture series. Sir, I request you to introduce the speaker and to take us forward in this program. Professor Satyakamji, please.
Thank you, Professor Pramod Kumarji. I am extremely glad and delighted that one of our senior colleagues, my friend, Professor Mohan B. Menon, is with us, and I welcome him, and I thank him also that he, in a short notice, when I called him, he, without any hesitation, say yes. So this is our bonding to the university, to the IGNOU. He has served many years. When I joined IGNOU in 1988, he was here. And many things I learned from him. And I always see him as a model for us because we were new. And I joined as lecturer, and he was director. And always when we listen to him about the distance education, about the higher education, and we were mesmerized. So I'm personally very delighted on the behalf of Indira Gandhi National Open University and Center for Freedom Struggle and Diaspora Studies. I welcome you, sir, on this occasion that you have give your action to speak on the topic challenging the development of Indian education since independence. This topic is very relevant to take us to the war of independence and how we struggle and how the Indian education system has been transformed during the British era, and how after independence we tried to free ourselves from the clutches of the colonial mindset and colonial education system that we often said the Macaulay system. So we will hear a good lecture from Professor Mohan Menon. As you have said, we are associates. We have a good association, and for a long time we were here. And he is presently working as the founding honorary chairperson of the Disha Global Trust, Kochi, India. He is living in Kochi, and as I have told you that he held several important positions globally and during his over 45 years of career, including that of chief and director of the UNESCO UNRWA education program for Palestinian refugees, Jordan, deputy vice chancellor academic in Bausan Open University, Malaysia, education specialist and team leader at the Commonwealth of Learning Canada, chairman National Institute of Open Schooling NIUS, first planning officer and professor director School of Education at Indira Gandhi National Open University, and UGC research fellow and lecturer at the Center of Advanced Study in Education, MS University, Baroda, etc. Professor Menon is a very excellent teacher, researcher, and he has expertise in development and published work have been mainly in the areas of teacher education, science education, instructional design, open distance learning, open education resources, and other fields of the higher education. And Professor Menon has consulted extensively. He is a global person for international agencies such as UNESCO, UNDP, World Bank, UNICEF, COL, IDRC, DFID, so on and so forth. And he has been also associated with the Minister of Education, Government of India. So I welcome you, sir, to this lecture, and I welcome our esteemed Vice Chancellor, Professor Nageshwar Raoji, who is inspiration for us, and he is such a person that he always promotes us to do these things. And with his blessings, this program of 75 to organize 75 lectures, webinar series on the occasion of the commemoration of 75 years of India's independence is commemorated. I also welcome our Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Sumitra Kukreti, Professor of Pro Vice Chancellor IGNOU and eminent Professor of English, who has kindly agreed to give the presidential address today. So I welcome you, ma'am, to this 16th series of webinar. I also welcome Dr. M. Rajesh, Regional Director, IGNOU Regional Center, Vatakara, who has organized this program and talked to Professor Mohan B. Menon and also give the logistic and other support. I also welcome all the members and all the fraternity of IGNOU assembled here to listen the lecture of Professor Mohan B. Menon Saab. And I also welcome up director of the schools and RDs and all our friends, students, teachers, and if I forget any name or any person, please forgive me. So this is a great occasion. In the morning, first half, we had a lecture on the occasion of 26th anniversary, 26th lecture series of paying homage to Professor G. Ram Reddy, our founder, Vice Chancellor, and there was excellent speech by Professor Prasad and Professor Agrawal. So those who missed that lectures can listen that on the YouTube. That is there in recording is there. So now I hand over to Professor Pramod Kumar to go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. You have introduced our guest nicely. The way, like, I think it's a lifetime contribution that he has made, and the kind of question as a university that we are exploring as to how do we, kind of transport ourselves in the 21st century learning atmosphere, and then, the kind of diverse social landscape that we have. I think we are very lucky to have a speaker like you who will illuminate our understanding as to how do we chart our kind of journey ahead. And when we are looking at, like, I feel that the whole world is looking at us, and Indian higher education sector has witnessed a tremendous increase, like in the number of universities and colleges since independence. No, so I think what we are trying to do through these lecture series is kind of position ourselves and kind of identify our responsibility as to, like, when we complete 75 years, we cannot look back and can kind of blame anyone. It's about, like, kind of identifying and kind of taking a resolve as to how we can fulfill our share of responsibility. So we look forward to you, sir, for your important words. And we kind of request you to take over now and enlighten our understanding on today's subject. Professor Menon, we are so delighted to welcome you and to listen to you, sir. Thank you very much. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Pramod Kumar, and thanks, Professor Satyakam. I was remembering those old days when you were presenting about the early days. Incidentally, I always tell people that I was the first planning officer and the only planning officer that IGNO had, because there was no position of planning officer at.
Sir, you are muted, sir. Can you just look at it, sir? The unmute button, like, sir.
Yeah. Can you hear now?
Yeah, it is better.
Yeah. Because that just disconnects in, I don't know why, so I have to rejoin. So please forgive me if that happens in between. Technology has its disadvantages also. It's a pleasant coincidence that it happened on the day that you had the memorial lecture for Professor Jim Ramreddy, which I think I should really, I would not have remembered him today in this presentation, but then it so happened that God Almighty made me remember that I had to, and that I cannot forget also. Professor Tekam will remember, and many other participants here, the old colleagues will remember. Professor Reddy brought people from all over the country. Professor B.S. Sharma, I worked with him. He was academic PVC. Professor Tripathi was there at that time. Professor Chaturvedi for the regional services. Professor Khan for. So what I'm trying to say is that he picked up people. I was in Baroda. I never would have joined IGNO just because I met Professor Reddy in an IIT seminar, and he said, he didn't say anything. He said, where you are, and then I find that something was coming later. The interview was there. And, you see, it's really, so let's start with a tribute to Professor Reddy, and also the all colleagues. I'm happy that I'm with you today. See, all good words about me. Thank you so much. But I would like to be known as your colleague. And for 13, 14 years, I worked with IGNO. And then when, of course, Professor Rajesh, Dr. Rajesh called me and said that, can you give this talk about Indian education? I suddenly remembered Dr. Mark Telley's famous book, India in Slow Motion, at that time. And then because he says, Mark Telley and Gillian Wright, published that book in 2002 or 3. I exactly don't remember. But he says India has the potential, but is not really moving forward to the extent required. So then, but from with education, I think I suddenly said, yeah, India should have developed much further in the case of education, but probably it is in slow motion, like an elephant. But elephant moves, and when it moves, then it can move anywhere. You see the herd of elephant moving in China, it was all in the news. So that's possible. So then I thought that coming to the presentation, what should I present? I mean, that is the challenges when you say about Indian education, its development. It's a very mammoth type of a thing. It is. To limit that into about 25 minutes presentation here is something which is, I don't know how one can really do. So I thought that I should focus on certain areas only, and then give something like a bird's eye view of 75 years of Indian education. Which would say that I may not be able to go to many of the micro aspects of the pre-independence time. Of course, that I am not focusing at all. My most focus would be post independence, but nevertheless, I will have to focus on something in the post independence. And I thought there are 4 areas that I can take as focus, which are broad challenges which India faced at the time of independence. One is access to education. Access. How many people are participating in education, including literacy, and then of course primary education and participation in higher education, etc. At that time, and inclusion of all in the society. You see, that is another important thing. It is not that, and most of them probably at that time was coming from the more advantaged communities in many ways. And then, of course, the quality. Access alone is not enough. Quality of educational provision that we are giving in different sectors. And what is the relevance of that? Relevance of the education that the people are getting. So these are the 4 things broadly I am going to focus on. And of course, there will be other aspects also coming in within the discussion of this. Now, going into the pre-independence, I think we should also remember the ancient and medieval education, not only in India, globally, if you look at, has been religious education, has been very elitist education, and education was really not for the masses to that extent, and I have no intention to go into the details of that. And this is not the case in India alone. Indian, Chinese, European educational institutions in both the ancient as well as medieval period shows that it is mostly for a few people. I mean, not a very large number that education was given. And then, of course, focus has been in Indian education to other aspects of life, also health, and all these was taken care of, and all this. So I don't want to go into that, but all that influence still has to be there, and then we have to see how that would have influenced us later. Now, modern period, if you look at it, is globally, it is modern is seen as the post-industrial revolution time. And post-industrial revolution time, till that time, it was mostly for the elitist education. But industrial revolution really had an impact on the education, in the sense that there are others also who would have to be trained, educated to be a good workforce in the society. And that idea of education for all, in one, not in the same words, but came up during that time in Europe. And but India being with the British, being a British colony at that time, that did not have that impact to that extent in India, because as Professor Tekam was mentioning initially, that we were governed by the Macaulay's minutes which actually said, which was something like a vision or mission or whatever that the British had, a class of persons who are Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, opinions, morals, and intellect, who would always cooperate with the British rules. You see, it clearly says what would have been the focus of the Britishers as far as Indian education is concerned. And according to that vision, the Britishers was to create a class of literate people, not all, but a class, a group of literate people, which would help them in administration, in keeping the mind, and that is a limited objective that they had. They did not pay any attention for the spread of education and literacy in India. You see, that is a British period by the British. But that doesn't mean that during the British period there were no other developments. Other developments, the local efforts have been there, like the Indian freedom movement had an impact on how education has to be looked at in our own society. So we have examples of institutions, universities, all being set up. We know about the BHU and AMU and so many other educational institutions coming up. Even at the school level, good institutions came up because of the efforts made by the Indians and the Indian leaders and social leaders in this during that time. And the princely states also. I have to mention, sitting in Kerala and studying long back in Baroda, I cannot miss that efforts of princely states, free and compulsory primary education in Travancore and Baroda states came up during the First World War time. See, that sort of a long vision they had. And I remember well in Travancore, I know my mother used to say many a time that if you don't go to school, you will be taxed also. You will have to pay if your child is not going into, that sort of a in the state of Travancore. And so that was the type of efforts that happened. But I'm not going into those details, and because I'm focusing on the challenges in the post independence. But I had to see what was the situation. I think it is important to look at the situation at the time of independence. At the time of independence, the literacy was only about 18%, about 19%, and male literacy was about 27%, and female less than 10%. It's 9%. That was the literacy. So you don't have to talk about what would be the primary education enrollment. Without literacy, they would not have been. And so many of them entered the school but did not learn anything, and they dropped out. And the dropout rate was very high at that time. The teacher-student ratio was also large, in the sense 1:34 teachers, and women participation in the teaching community was 15%. Today, I think we have much larger. We have women in educational teaching is very large, and one primary school for 13 square kilometers. Today, we know that every 1 kilometer there is a primary school in most parts. Main emphasis on general education and no focus on technical vocational education, ignored. And Indian language and culture was neglected, and its medium was English, and neglect of the weaker sections of the society. This was the state of the affairs at that time, at the time of independence. Now, as far as professional technical education is concerned, in 1951, statistics says that there were only 28 medical colleges and 4 dental colleges in the entire country. There are 4,500 seats available in engineering technology institutions. There are 33 engineering colleges altogether. Professional and vocational educations like management, architecture, agriculture were completely neglected. So that was the situation when we entered, and then the post-independence period. If you look at the task, we can easily see the task was very mammoth. Even to access inclusion of all the society, respective of gender, caste, religion, quality of teachers, very, very less trained teachers at that time, and curriculum, what sort of curriculum, the relevance of curriculum to life and work, all these were to be the focus. I think as all of us would see that the immediate thing that the government did at that time was to, the constitution was formulated, and it was 1950. And at that time, according to the constitution, if you look at the provisions, the original constitutional provisions in education, as well as what was amendments that happened later, the directive principles had this free and compulsory education for all children until they complete the age of 14 years. All of us know. I mean, this we have been talking about, and then we have been keeping that as our light, and to reach that. And and the reason was that for social justice and democracy, but also for improving average worker competence and increasing national productivity. This was considered to be very important to have the compulsory education, especially up to 14 years. But that did not work to that extent. Our experience later says, I'm not going in a chronological manner here, but I want to bring in that it became a strength. It became a strong, what can I say, that objective when it became when the 42nd Amendment that happened in no, I'm sorry, the 42nd Amendment was to the education as a state subject. That was in 1976, but till that time the Constitution said that it will be a state subject, and it was moved to the concurrent list of the Constitution in 1976. What has really that given, we will have some discussion towards the end of my talk, to what extent it helped, to what extent it came in the way. But that now it is in the concurrent list. Now, for the universal primary education, the Right to Education Act of 2002, this article was inserted 21A into the Indian Constitution, declaring right to education as a fundamental right, and that makes it make things different. Today, for example, a child can really demand that he or she should be provided that education within the primary education school, primary school within the jurisdiction of, or within the geographical area of within 1 kilometer. So that was a real legal right that people got. Now, in the Constitution, there were other aspects also against the discrimination that has been happening in the society. So there are several articles. I don't want to go into those details, but it is for it prohibits discrimination against any citizen on the basis of gender, religion, race, or place of birth. It empowers the state to create specific provisions for women, including education. So it is not only in educational provisions, but other areas also. And according to the Article 15.1, again, according to this article, the state shall not discriminate against any citizen on the basis of gender, religion, race, or place of birth. It was very important to have those constitutional provisions. And then, of course, with regard to the constitutional provisions for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, that also we know that, and the weaker sections of the community, the reservations that was made. So all these provisions have been there, and with that equipment, the legal equipment, the government went into the expansion of education. And if you really look at from 1947 till today, it has been incredible. I mean, it's not that we have to undermine the development that has happened at different stages. For a country like India, which is so large and the largest democracy, if it was a autocracy like China, that would have been a different situation. But a democracy, to achieve some of these things through a democratic process, is not that simple. And and we have the federal system, the union government and the state government, similar to, for example, US or Canada, and they also have different responsibilities. In US, for example, it is more with the states, of the education is more or less entirely with the states. In Canada also, the residual part only goes to the central government, the federal government there. So both the center and the state governments did show great concern after the independence time, during the post-independence time, early days, on improvements in education, make it accessible across all sections of the society from elite to masses. And revamp the whole education system was considered most important at that time. If you what we remember in the first 20-25 years of independence, one commission after other were formulated. We have this Radhakrishnan Commission for Higher Education. Then we have the Mudaliar Commission for Secondary Education, and then Kothari Education Commission report, probably one of the best drafted education report, not only in India but anywhere in the world. So comprehensive to be done during 64-66. Report was, even today, if you go back and start looking at that, many of the things we are trying to achieve today was mentioned at that time in the Kothari Commission report. Although, for example, IGNOU came into existence only in 1985, but Kothari Commission had mentioned about correspondence education and what it should be really achieved. So you can really see in many of these areas, it is talking about even technology, not the type of technology we are talking about now, but the ICT integration and such things. And after this, there were several policy formulations happened, as also we know. The draft national policy emerging from Kothari Commission in 1968. This did not become a policy, but it was only a draft. Then the challenge of education, a policy perspective in 1985. Then NP, National Policy of Education, 1986, which we talked about quite a lot till the recent policy came into existence, National Education Policy 2020. And in between also, after 1986 policy, there was a modified version in 1992 and a program of action. All these were trying to, changes happened without that. Although 1986, IGNOU's creation was in a way included in the 1986 policy, but IGNOU came into existence 1 year before, 1985. So that was a very, very, what can I say, that very a very main landmark in the higher education system in the country is the open education, open universities in India, and how it increased the access. Now, in terms of other initiatives, if you look at, there are other institutions were set up after independence. TIFR, for example, was already there in 1945, set up by Tatas, but then that was strengthened further, and then government almost took it over, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. Then the UGC, which was a committee, grants committee, became the University Grants Commission. And the NCRT is setting up in 1961 for school education. And another important and very important to focus here is that the agriculture land grant universities that came up during the late 50s and early 60s. And that was the first time that an agriculture university was being set up in any country. And imagine that agriculture universities and the agriculture research that went into that, and made a big difference in the. I mean, we were depending on outside for food at that time. We were not self-sufficient for food, and we were PL480. Many of
Professor Menon, this unmute thing has to. Yeah. You are again muted, sir.
Sir, still it is muted, sir. मैंने अभी आपके सामने खोला।
Can you hear me now?
Right, right,
Yeah,
sir.
it was
Yes,
not
sir.
muted. It is actually I had to rejoin because of the some connectivity thing. Anyway, so you can hear now.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. All right. So, so I was talking about the agriculture universities, and that was a major landmark. I mean, agriculture universities, and if you look at the agriculture research, which led to the green revolution, and also the impact that it had in also in other areas, in the milk revolution that came up from Gujarat. All these are to be, and also science and technology education. The IITs came up in the 50s and 60s, and today we have expanded that. We have gone for more IITs. Space research, we have Mangalayan of today, but space research, which was mooted in the 50s, I think that's very important to see. And in the Baba Atomic Research Center, which went into the development of atomic energy applications. So there were initiatives of this sort. But now leaving that, let me focus more on now the basic sort of thing, access and etc. And see, for access, basically, what the country has been trying to do is universal literacy has to be brought in. University primary education, universal primary education, reaching out to all sections. Then, of course, higher education, democratizing higher education, vocationalizing education was another focus which was there. Improving teacher quality. Being from teacher education, I mean, we can have another long presentation on that. But then, teacher quality was an area which was looked at, and improving school participation, school infrastructure. All these were there, and you remember you have to see this in the light of the amendment that happened, the 45th Amendment of being in the concurrent list. Centers started putting more money into the development. I mean, we remember those days of DPEP, which then later went into Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, and then Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan for secondary education, then the Ucha Shiksha Abhiyan later, and all these have been there. And all these were the center's intervention in improving, because it was probably seen at that time that many states are not putting money enough into education, because the money was being given to the school, the states. Some of the states put all the money into, especially my primary education. So you'll find some states today are better developed in the area of school education than others. One main reason is that their allocation of money for different levels have been different. And then, of course, the increasing community participation is another thing which happened during, we tried during the district primary education project time, DPEP, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Interestingly, there was much more community participation before independence. I mean, I remember that going to some schools in Gujarat, there were in the villages, there were schools which were supported by the village. They will go and ask what's happening to the school. I mean, if the teachers don't come and all. But that got reduced because of government intervention in the school. Because it was all, teachers were earlier reporting to the community, teachers started reporting to the government. So they thought, why should we report to the community? The government has to be. We have to send it to the inspector of schools. So that actually brought down the community participation to a great extent during the 50s, 60s. Now this was to be brought back. So the community participation with the community village committee, education committee, and such things were that came up during the 80s, for example, 90s, 80s and 90s, and then. There was a Central Advisory Board of Education which was created. Today, of course, it is defunct. It is not there. And the NCRT, on its own way, created the RIEs, SCRTs, and supported the SCRTs, diets, which is a very important district institute for education and training. Diets were also a centrally sponsored scheme because of the central intervention and putting money into the into this scheme. And then, of course, we all know about the Navodaya schools, Vidyalayas, which are going on, quality schools, one in every district in the country. And teacher education is going through a difficult time. Even today, that's very sad to say that, because we started with the license to teaching LT to Bachelor of Teaching BT to B.Ed, 1 year, 2 years. Then the 4-year integrated program, which in the 60s RIE tried out, but finally the government decided, no, we should all have 4-year integrated program, and the efforts are being made. Hopefully, that will improve the teacher development, at least the preschool, pre-service teaching, now teacher training, but in-service teacher training has to be properly connected and integrated with that, so that should only improve the quality of teaching. Now, open education and technology integration, I think I should mention that area, because it is connected with access quite a bit and also connected with quality improvement. Democratizing higher education, the open universities came up, open schools came up, and then of course later the whole technology integration in the form of the online courses, digitization, digital learning, resource repositories. Today we have Swayam for higher education. We have IGNOU has its own repository, NCRT has its own repository, so there's a lot of materials now available. Maybe all of them are not with restrictions. I mean, with copyright relaxations, OER. They may not be OER. Some of them are. So there's a need probably to make that happen. And of course, other centrally sponsored schemes came up later, like I told you about the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, then Rashtriya Uchatar Shiksha Abhiyan, RUSA. And the latest, interestingly, whenever we talked about teacher education earlier, we were only thinking about schools. Even NCTE, which was set up, very clearly said that we are only concerned with school teachers. And that too, that I did not mention at all, I should have earlier, not only government and government-aided schools. How the private schools are going on, we still have no great idea about it. So that's a very sad situation in a way, because a lot of our children are going into private schools. They are not being, yes, the syllabus, the curriculum and all these, the CBSE and all curriculum is there. But otherwise, the control is quite limited there. For higher education teachers, the Pandit Madan Mohan Malavya National Mission is a good scheme that has now all the schools of education that came up in all the central universities are focusing on higher education teachers. And then, so if you look at the achievements, I think I will finish in 5 minutes. I'm sorry, I'm a little delayed. In 5 minutes' time, the great quantitative expansion at all levels of education, I think we can really claim that as an achievement. There has been expansion. I don't know how many universities, 600, 700, 800, I missed the number, but there are several universities. Privatization is happening. There is private universities, at least with state legislation. Central legislation, no, it has not been. But quality of some of them are good, some of them are not good. Quality is still an issue with NAC and all these being there also. Quality is another issue which we have to really look into. And availability of primary school within a kilometer. Average primary school enrollment has gone up. Gross enrollment average between 1971 to 2019 is 94%. And 2015, the gross enrollment ratio was 74% for secondary education. And the gross enrollment ratio in higher education is, this may be a wrong figure, you may be able to correct, 27 or 28%. But I am not very sure whether they are all in the age-specific population. The age-specific means we are talking about 18 to 23, 25. I think if my information is right, the IGNOU enrollment also goes into the higher education because they are in higher education. So we cannot really say that is age-specific population. There have been quality assurance agencies which have been doing some good job. Indian Medical Council, Indian Nursing Council, AICTE, which of course is now not, AICTE is continuing, or I don't know, about 2020 NCT is continuing. NAC, of course, is doing a good job. I think NAC is, I can see the colleges improvement is happening. I can see in Cochin, in fact, the colleges, how they are really looking for NAC assessment and accreditation. And achievements, if you look at increased trained teachers in schools, yes, but still we have untrained teachers in the government schools. In number, I cannot say here. There may be statistics available. And I know very well that there are private schools which take teachers without training and supposed to be good private schools. Textbooks for all children, NCRT sort of came out with some sort of a model for the whole country, and then states were given the freedom to change according to their local needs, because school education has to be according to the local needs, even to the district needs. That's why the district primary education projects focus on district-centered, even curricular changes district-wise. Now, quality improvement in government schools has happened, really. I can give two examples. One, I have been living now for the last 3-4 years here in Kerala. In the last 2 years, especially during the COVID time, many students from the private schools have gone into government schools. Earlier, it was different. In fact, the Cochin Regional Center here is on the ground of a school which was closed down in Cochin. That was at that time. Now they are expanding the enrollment in schools. So this actually says, and they really saw that the government schools and the Victor television programs going to the children from the state headquarters in Thiruvananthapuram, along with the local support, online support given by the school, made the government schools better than some of the private schools. I'm not talking all private schools. Some very good private schools are there. So some of the from bad private schools, people have moved to government schools. That's a very good, information. And the similar thing I understand happened in Delhi government schools. Delhi government schools, the result has also gone up. And I'm told, I don't really know, people can correct me if I'm wrong, that many of the Delhi public schools have also improved their infrastructure. And technology integration in school, many schools have happened, not only in private schools, not only in so-called good private schools. But still we have issues faced, and I'll just flag those issues and conclude this. Curriculum and instruction, decentralized versus centralized. This is a broader issue of center-state relationship, center-state responsibility. In concurrent list, what should be come from center and what should the state do? I think this is an issue we are still, only recently we had this information like the schools, the curriculum of school curriculum will be collected from different states, and the center will make a national curriculum, and then that national curriculum has to be followed by all schools in the country. That will only make the curriculum uniform rather than providing the flexibility. That's my personal view. So if any particular day, if you want to know which subject is being taught in any school in India, you should be able to say that. Maybe that's a good thing to say as a centralized activity. Similarly, all these technology integration thing also, like online courses and are mainly we are looking at online courses being offered directly to the institutions. We are not highlighting the importance of social media for improving community networking and learning from within the learning community. I mean, I know there are issues in social media, which of course we have to be careful about, but then that has a potential in bringing children together in a class within a WhatsApp group or whatever. And the teacher autonomy is still, teachers' autonomy is being reduced than being improved. So that's the sort of, these are some of the issues that is coming. Financing, I think that I stop with, and learning performance. Learning performance is still an issue. Let me first talk about learning performance. There is an ASER 2018 report I got from the Google that in grade 5, after more than 4 years of schooling, only, this is 2018 report, by the by, only half of all children could read a grade 2 level text fluently. The National Achievement Survey 2017, which was conducted for grades 3, 5, and 8, gave a similar picture with only 45.2% of students achieving the targeted performance levels across all subjects and classes at the national level. This I have quoted from my Google. And last is, so performance is an issue. We are really not knowing the outcomes are being achieved, the learning outcomes. And financing, if you look at financing, last year's, that is 2019-20, financing was, it is reported by the government, is 3.1% of the GDP. We have been talking right from
Professor Menon, this is again an issue. You need to unmute, and then maybe we'll request you to conclude also, please.
Yeah, can you hear now?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
I conclude also, so it's a good thing before the computer stops me. So let me conclude. So financing is a major issue. Now, from where this money should come? Should it come from the government? We have been always trying to say that at least primary education, it is the responsibility of the government according to Constitution. At the age of 14, with the right to education and all, that should be entirely funded by government. We have several primary schools which are private, and we really don't know what's happening in those schools because that's not in the part of statistics. So, but government is now doing a good thing by suggesting 2020 policy. I did not bring in because it is just 1 year that the policy is in place. There is several strategies being worked out. My general feeling about the policy is that it should be made more participative in terms of the states. I mean, sitting in Kerala, of course, Kerala is a difficult state for the government. So I cannot actually say this, but we always feel that there are different things that the states may like to do. Gujarat, I have been talking about. Gujarat has some very good examples because I lived there, I stayed. I think that sort of a freedom should go into that, and then so centralizing everything is not a good idea. Having only Swayam as a repository for the whole country and everything, all the materials should go to Swayam or the IGNOR repository is not a good idea. Let people have their own repositories. Every university should have their own repository. They have to create the materials. I'm not telling that Swayam quality is bad or good or anything. I really don't know much about it. But then everybody should be encouraged. That's about open educational resources. It should come from all over the world. And why only in India? I mean, materials may come from all over. So all these things are my general opinion about it, but then I wouldn't talk about that much. And then I will try to conclude this by telling that we are still to achieve with regard to quality. Access, I think we will achieve. We will, because there is a legal requirement that right to education. So court will come and tell that you have to do that. How teacher education improved? The Supreme Court came and told that you cannot go on doing this. I mean, you have to do something differently. And maybe the Supreme Court will come and tell about primary education, about right to education. But quality, how are you going to assess the quality? The quality is an issue. Relevance is an issue. Whether general education or education is relevant to the life, all these are issues. So still issues are there. But then, as I said in the beginning, we are a large country. We are quite complex. We are a democratic country, so we are probably surely going in the right direction. But whether we would have achieved, should have achieved more than more in 75 years is a $1 million question. I don't know what answer one should give, but that is for us all to think about. Let me again thank you, all of you. Basically, it was not just a question of my presenting this. I went through some of these things. I tried to, in education, history of education was not my specialization. Mine was educational technology always. But then it helped me to go back to the earlier days. I might not have covered everything. And thank you so much for inviting me. And then bye and all the best to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much indeed. You have done such great justice through this insightful, instructive, and engaging, empowering discourse on evolution and development of Indian scenarios, sir. You talked about many important issues, challenges that we are facing right from the Macaulay's time in 1838 to this. You talked about RTI and right to education and technology integration, issues of access, and the major success that we have achieved. And thank you that the way that you complemented IGNOU's role in providing most qualitative education in the most inexpensive way. Thank you very much, sir. We are very grateful. It's a very compact program, sir. We will listen to you in greater detail some other opportunity. And now I think it's high time that we listen to our presidential address for today. Professor Sumitraji Kukreti, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor IGNOU, will give her thoughts, her opinions, her insights on this. Ma'am, you are requested to deliver the presidential address. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pramod, for giving me this opportunity to share my views on this platform. And I would say, wow. It was a sheer pleasure to listen Professor Menon. But first of all, I would like to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Nageshwar Raoji, who is the main motivating spirit behind this series of events. Bharat Ka Amrit Mahotsav is contributing immensely in revitalizing national consciousness and paying tribute to our unsung national heroes. Definitely, this event has become so enlightening due to the presence of today's knowledgeable keynote speaker, Professor Mohan B. Menon, who expressed his views so eloquently on challenges in Indian education after independence. Professor Menon is an exemplary scholar and academician, having been in key positions in many national and international organizations. He has a vast experience and exposure which is unmatchable, and it was clearly reflecting in his lecture. With the input of his research and keen observation, he has tight grip on the problems of education system in the country. He elaborately discussed various challenges and nuances of education and explained how it can be used as a powerful tool to serve the purpose of nation building, provided it is used cautiously. I would like to thank Professor Satyakam, Pro Vice Chancellor and organizer of this webinar, and other Pro Vice Chancellors, Professor R.P. Das and Professor Uma Kanjilal, for their valuable presence. As we all know that the British government introduced Western education in India, mainly with a view to get Indian help in running the administration. And as it has already been stated by Professor Menon, that the recommendations by Macaulay's Minute in 1935 determined the character of education in India, and the system of English education was adopted by the British government only for their own welfare, not for the welfare of Indians. True education can transform human life. All of us would definitely agree on that one issue. And due to this quality of education, it has always been an instrument in the hands of rulers who used it to implement their own ideology. In ancient India, Sanskrit was the medium of education, and Indian knowledge system attained such high place that Indian universities Takshila, Nalanda, and Vikramshila attracted students from all over the world. Even content wise, education kept changing itself according to the agenda and ideology of the rulers. Because in ancient period, the aim of education was emancipation of soul. Sa vidya ya vimuktaye. Welfare of society was given priority over individual welfare. And Vedas laid the foundation of entire Hindu culture and education system. Then came a paradigm shift. And during the middle period, the education system deteriorated and education became available only to the privileged few. Upper class of the society and mostly rich people could afford education, and large sections of society, the downtrodden and women, were conveniently deprived of it. In this period, when Mughal invaders ruled India, medium of instruction changed from Sanskrit to Persian, which also became the court language. Later, in early 19th century, when the Britishers and Portuguese started ruling the country, they molded the education system according to their own convenience. That's why in places like Goa and Puducherry, Portuguese and French acquired importance, while in rest of the country, English obtained respectable status of court language. The aim of education was completely changed during this period. As Professor Menon has already stated in detail, that Macaulay expressed his opinion about aim of education in India, which was to form a class who may be interpreters between us, means between Britishers and the millions whom we govern. A class of persons, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. The colonialism and centuries of slavery, along with Western education system, has developed a kind of inferiority complex in Indians, which is rooted deep in us, pierced into our soul, and gets reflected in our blind admiration to Western culture and all other things associated with the West. Even at a cursory glance, it is clear that during Vedic period, our education was tilting towards religion, spiritualism, and as I have already discussed, the goal of education was emancipation of soul. So the affairs of body were neglected at the expense of soul. If we compare it with contemporary education system implemented by Britishers, because we more or less we still following that system, and the present scenario, we realize that the situation has totally reversed itself. One primary reason for this could be the difference in the ideology, because in ancient period, knowledge was regarded as purifier of soul. But in Western tradition, knowledge is a symbol of power. So basically, this is ideological difference between the two that demarcates boundaries between them. Sadly, from one excess, we are moving to another. Today, the mundane worldly affairs, for example, securing a seat in IIT or any medical college and hoarding money has acquired precedence over everything else. Sans morals, values, emancipation, in truth, this education system has converted man into money-making machine. The constant fear of lagging behind in this race is hitting hard on our mental peace. And every year, cases of personality disorders and mental diseases are on rise. No doubt, life has become a rat race, and to quote Shakespeare, happiness is but an occasional episode in the general drama of pain. The biggest challenge in this competitive system is that it has snatched away happiness from human life. We are constantly on move and never even care to realize that we are moving in a circle. So, is there any solution? I believe that to achieve the balance, the equilibrium between both these axes is the greatest challenge for our education system. Because on the one hand, one cannot survive without bread. On the other hand, man cannot live by bread alone, and the soul has its own demands. The most developed and advanced countries are toiling hard to immerse in spiritualism for solace and peace. And we who once were the source of wisdom for entire globe never penetrate in our hearts and care to think how far we have deviated from that point. T.S. Eliot, though himself an American author, raised this question in his play in 1934. Where is the life we have lost in living? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? The cycles of heaven in 20 centuries bring us farther from God and nearer to the dust. I believe that the modern educations should try to achieve an equilibrium between professional education, vocational education on the one hand, and value education on the other. The balance between body and soul could be obtained by becoming financially secure and realizing the aim of human life. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs clearly advocates that after fulfilling physiological and security needs, on top of the pyramid is need for self actualization. And perfect happiness can be attained only after reaching at the top of this hierarchy. I'm very positive that National Education Policy 2020, with adequate emphasis on moral, life skill education, and vocational job oriented education, technical education, would help institutions to establish an equilibrium. This NEP would definitely prove its efficacy in instilling balanced persona in our future generation. With this hope, I would like to stop here. And in the end, I thank all the intellectuals for sparing their precious time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. With your address, with your presidential address, the wheel has come full circle. The issues that Professor Menon raised so very poignantly, so very powerfully, you also address those, and the in the transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary way you engage with all the issues and challenges that we have to negotiate with as a country, as a society, and the I think in the context of NEP and the other issues, as a true thought leader, you have inspired us one more time, ma'am. We are so very grateful for this address, and we have taken down each and every point that you have made, and I think this churning that is taking place through the series of lectures, will provide us that opportunity, and will include all those points there, ma'am. Thank you very much. And now it's a very compact program, and I think it's we are more keen to listen to you, all of you, more and more, but we are moving towards the conclusive phase of this program, and I would now request Dr. M. Rajesh from Vatakra, Kerala, for his role, that is to communicate our sense of gratefulness for all the people who have made it this success a reality. Dr. Rajesh ji, please. Dr. M. Rajesh.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I hope I am audible, sir.
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. First and foremost, let me express my sincere gratitude to the Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor Nageshwara Rao, sir, and the Honorable PVC, sir, Professor Satyakam, sir, for associating IGNOU RC Vadagara with this prestigious webinar. It is a matter of great pride and honor for us that we are getting associated with this national program, which is so significant in the context of the history of our great nation. The topic of discussion today is significant as well as timely. Education is at the base, as you all know, for all development in any society. India, in the last 75 years, has embarked upon this journey for relentless pursuit of excellence in education. Being a nascent democracy, the challenges are many in the path of attainment of India's goals. The challenge involves both issues of access, equity, quality, relevance, inclusiveness, all of which had been so eloquently flagged by Mohan Menon sir in his very wonderful exposition. The challenge involves both quality and quantity in a major sense. If we take the case of school education as such, which sir had flagged so intensely in his very vibrant deliberation, there are two significant verdicts which come to my mind. One is this Mohini Jain versus State of Karnataka and JP Unnikrishnan versus State of Andhra Pradesh, taking inspiration on which Article 21A was included under right to life. That is, education now has been accepted as a fundamental right, of course, till the age of 14, through this very seminal inclusion in our constitutional provisions. The NEP 2020 has also added many new dimensions to the already wide spectrum of educational discourse. The emphasis of NEP on the judicious use of technology, apart from significant aspects related to vocationalization of education, is also something which our speakers have highlighted in great intensity. In his very eloquent style, Mohan Menon sir has dealt with the whole gamut of issues concerning this very vital area. Sir has been an inspiration for all those who have been working in distance education like us. And this lecture has been no less inspiring either. I, on behalf of IGNO, wish to thank Professor Mohan Menon sir for his enlightening and thought-provoking talk. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Nageshwar Rao sir, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, for guiding and motivating us. Under sir's astute leadership, the university is scaling great heights and has achieved the most coveted and prestigious achievement of getting a NAC A++ grade. It is indeed a privilege to work under such decisive and effective leadership. Our gratitude is due to Professor Satyakam sir, the Honorable PVC of IGNO, who is the head of the Center for Freedom and Diaspora Studies, and who is successfully and efficiently coordinating this lecture series. With his extremely pleasant and easy manners, sir has made it a pleasure for others also to get associated and work with him. We thank sir for the constant motivation and the support that we are receiving from him on all quarters. I would like to thank Professor Sumitra Kukreti Madam, the Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, for her very, very eloquent presidential address. Madam has given a very clear overview of the issue areas concerning education and has also provided a very clear direction to the discussion on the subject. Madam has given a very clear exposition of the educational development that has taken place over the centuries, which is, and that too in such a short time, and I thank Madam for this effort. My heartfelt gratitude is also due to our other Honorable Pro Vice Chancellors, Professor R.P. Das sir and Professor Uma Kanjilal Madam, who for the constant encouragement and active participation in all activities of IGNO. I express my gratitude to Professor Pramod Kumar sir for moderating the proceedings and making it a grand success. Finally, I thank all the directors of schools, divisions, cells, centers, teachers, academics, non-academic staff of IGNO for their support in making this program a grand success. Thank you, one and all.
Sir, we are now towards the end point of this. Professor Satyakam, last word from you, sir, before we...
No, I congratulate everybody for successful completion of this 16th webinar, and I'm delighted, and indeed I'm very, very thankful to Professor Menon that he has accepted our invitation. And I am pleased to see him after a long time. So this will give me good strength and energy that we are again linking to our stalwarts who have worked very much for our university, and where we have reached A++. Mohan Menon is also uh, can be with us in this journey.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your support, cooperation. We'll look forward to connecting to all of you once again for the next session of such important intellectual debate and discourse next time, next Friday. Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Thank
Thank
you,
for
thank you,
all the support.
thank you, Pramod.
Yes.
मैं ये कहना चाहता हूं कि मोहन मेनन जी के आने से केरल दिल्ली में आ गया है। बाहर